Okay, go.
Okay, so the prompt this week is about leadership in crisis and leadership development in general. So let's talk about ways that we believe organizations can prepare leaders at all levels to respond in a crisis, and what type of crisis is potentially going to impact us.
All right. Now, as far as the first question goes, I think the easiest answer is just offer like training courses. Like if you're working at a corporate job, like I work at State Farm, have to take multiple training courses like based off code of conduct. And my dad, he works at APS. He has to do the same training courses too, and they're required to do so. And I think in his case, if he doesn't do it, he gets actually fined. Like they'll fine him for not doing those. So I think that's one way you can they can prepare.
Right.
I think like the best thing is to just be knowledgeable of every protocol to take in order to handle a crisis, regardless of if you're like the leader of taking on that crisis. I think everybody who is working at a specific place should be knowledgeable enough to know what's going on or to take some sort of action if something were to happen. For a previous job I had, which I mentioned to you guys before, when I like worked for the Sun Devil Fitness Complex and I had to like do all of like the first aid, CPR, all of that stuff, we weren't even allowed to start our job or anything unless we like did the proper classes and all of the proper like learned all of the protocol in case of an emergency. Like we weren't even allowed to start working.
Yeah, so like through the chapter, I feel like it was super intense. Like I think I don't even realize how like people put into effort like what crisis strategies there are, at least in my work life. Like at a restaurant, there's only so many like major crises. I guess could be like a fire alarm, like something catching on fire, like having to like evacuate because all the smoke, or like people stealing. Like I like count all the drawers, and when they're off consecutively by $30, $40, like I guess it's like a mini crisis in the fact that like people are stealing, and it's like how do you approach that? Like what chain of command do you go through? Like how many warnings do you give them? But I don't know, like with the whole crisis thing, I really think it's important that the book talked about was like studying like when you're not in a crisis is the most important time to prepare, like it means you're even closer to a crisis happening. It's like not far away in the future. It means like, oh, it could happen tomorrow because you've been having such a long streak of not having one.
Yeah, I think the cash shortages definitely falls into an economic crisis. I think that counts. I've had to kind of deal with a couple at work. At my current job, it's Barnes & Noble, so there's not really, it's like your typical kind of retail crisis training. Oh, fire alarms, whatever. Code Atoms. I don't know if you guys, it's like if you have a lost child. When I was at Disney, though, there was obviously a lot that we learned. And I actually had to use some of it. Like, we had unattended bags, and when that happens, you aren't allowed to touch it, and you have to call security, and you have to, like, stand guard of it, just in case.
Or something, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like, I've had to stand guard around a bag before. But it was like obviously a diaper bag, so it wasn't really a crisis, but you still handle it that way. Or I've had to deal with multiple code atoms, so like lost kids. And I had a heat stroke one time, and someone came in and they were like on the verge of passing out, and I had to call 911. And that and having lost kids that are really little kids, definitely the scariest. But if you have had that training and it's like relatively fresh, I think checking up on the training every 6 months is really good, because people tend to file it away because like, oh, I'm never going to have to use that. Right. And then that's when you have to use it.
Yeah. Like in the book, I give the example of the astronauts, like after the first one, they like started not caring about safety, and then that's when like 7 astronauts died because they weren't like keeping up on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I thought some of the examples the chapter gave too are really interesting. Like They talked about like the 9/11 and being in that pre-crisis stage.
Yeah.
That's been crazy.
Yeah.
I think it's crazy how they talked about like how all the different ways they communicated with their employees, you know, like all the different ways that they were reaching out to them through technology because there was like no cell service, you know. I thought it was really cool. Have you guys ever had to deal with like I feel like a lot of the chapter before talked about like having a new person come in charge, like a new leader, and how that could like be a crisis if not handled well. Like, have you guys ever worked in a position like that, or like someone has gotten hired?
I have. At my current job, we have a new supervisor. She's been there for almost a year now, but she's come in, and since she's come in, my area has like an 85% turnover rate because she's just terrible.
Wow.
And her leadership skills are just not good. But it's like for the company, they need a legitimate reason to fire her, and then they have to find someone better, and they have to train someone better. So it can be like there's more to it than just, oh, she's obviously bad, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I never really had any really bad instances on like someone from the outside coming in, but there was one time back at State Farm. Usually they hire within the company, and then this time for my supervisor for my team, they hired from outside, and he didn't know like all the protocols and procedures for that specific position, but after like a month or two, like my fellow coworkers, we helped them out with that. So our metrics, they weren't too bad, but that was like the only time that I had to deal with it. And yeah, it somewhat was a crisis, I guess, but it wasn't too bad though.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever really dealt with a outside leader having to come in and causing a crisis with anything. If anything, it was just like within my organization or workplace that there like many crises would come about. I've never had to personally deal with like a huge crisis and figure out like what to do and what protocols to take. I think the worst that happened was like on the job I had to know the proper protocols for like this kid like dislocated his knee like my second day on the job, and I had to like call an ambulance, fill out the proper paperwork, talk to him and calm him down, do the first aid while we wait for the ambulance, call my boss, let him know that I called the ambulance, and know the order of doing all of those sort of things in order to like kind of bring down the crisis a little bit. But I think that's like the worst sort of crisis that I've personally had to deal with, which within like a workplace.
On your second day, that must have been
terrifying.
It
was so scary, especially since I'm not anywhere near being a doctor or have any interest in that of any sort. So for me, it was just like really off the bat, and I was not expecting it at all. But I mean, it was a good learning experience.
One thing in the text that I super liked that like is like I think like a good like learning point about crisis. They called it like the discourse of renewal. It was talking about how like you like build from these crises and like you like use them to like create a new vision, and like as a leader that's so important because like the only way you can, because if you're just like trying to rebuild to have it just what it was, I feel like that's so like lacking in like inspiration and motivation for everyone under you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to learn from it and improve.
Yeah,
right.
You can apply that through any type of failure. So yeah, definitely agree with that.
All right. We cover everything.
Anything else to say? We're just like not there yet.
Is that it? Are we done?
I think we covered everything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything in the prompt, yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone have anything else to add?
I'm good.
I'm good too.
Yeah.